Welcome everyone to Family Group Night. I am so excited to introduce Betsy Comingore. She is going to share with us a little bit about emotional regulation. So Betsy, I'm going to turn it over to you and make you the host.
Okay. All right. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint here. And so first, I just want to say thank you for having me, and I'm excited to share some information. And I'll also say that I've gotten the question a few times, like, is this just for kids or does it apply to adults? And it definitely applies to adults. So some of the examples might feel more geared towards kids, but I'm going to try to make it very user-friendly for any age. So I'm Betsy. I am a licensed clinical mental health counselor. And the only reason why I was saying that slow is because that title just got changed from licensed professional counselor. So if you were more familiar with that title or license, now it's just longer, but it's the same thing. And then I'm also board certified in neurofeedback. So just a little bit more information on myself. So I was actually trained as an ABA tutor in undergrad and worked with a few different families who had children with autism, and I loved it. And then I went to App State and finished my undergrad in psychology. Took a long, decent amount of time off in between undergrad and grad school, and worked for an organization that worked with like middle school to college age kids. So, you know, apart from mental health, both like inside and outside of mental health, I have a love for and a long history of working with kids, teens, and their families. I love that. And then I ended up graduating from Western with my master's in counseling in 2014. After that, I worked for Focus Centers of Asheville for 5 years. So I don't know how familiar you guys are with Focus Centers, but it's one of the longest standing neurofeedback offices in the area. So that was wonderful and great. And they've been in practice for probably like 30 years. And excitingly enough, I, in 2019, opened up my own private practice here in Hendersonville. So it's right up from St. Gerard House off 6th Avenue, and it is called Heart and Mind. So just a couple things that we'll be talking about tonight. Of course, the emotional regulation, and then I'm going to go through the zones of regulation, and then like tools of how to either get out of a zone or stay in a good zone. And then we'll talk about the brain, like neuroplasticity and neurofeedback, and kind of how all of that plays into the nervous system and emotional regulation. So emotional regulation, and I guess like it feels more natural or like proper for me to be able to stop and ask questions, but I'm not going to do that. And we'll just save all the questions for the end. So if you have a question or think of something, if you want to like jot it down, or I guess maybe you could like send me a chat that I won't look at until later. And then it might be nice to have something to write down, a pen and a paper, just in case I'm asking like an open-ended, can you think of a certain example of something? That's not required, but might be nice to have. Okay, so emotional regulation is also, can also be called self-regulation. So it's just basically the idea of how we are dealing with kind of bigger emotions or feelings, like very, very excited or very frustrated, worried, angry, how we deal with those types of feelings. And for children specifically, anger, well, I won't even say specifically, I would say most adults are like better maybe at not just going to anger, but of course we know that like anger is a broad emotion. Like there's usually a lot of stuff under anger. But for kids, anger can be the like easiest way or their go-to way to like express themselves that something more is happening under the surface, or they can also struggle with avoidance. So that is pretty common. And hopefully by the end of this, we'll kind of figure out some ways, other ways, apart from anger and avoidance. So some signs of dysregulation, of course, would be like tantrum or meltdowns. I know a couple of you guys mentioned like the quick to escalating or escalation from your kids. So meltdowns are like typical. So this would be like if they're lasting longer than average or they're happening more frequently than typical. That might be a sign that they're feeling dysregulated, or like a lack of attention, poor concentration, distractibility or distracted, poor sleep patterns. So we'll get a little bit more into this later, but a lot of regulation has to do with arousal levels in the body. So I'm speaking of arousal in terms of the nervous system. So if your nervous system is kind of kicked into high gear or over aroused, falling asleep might be harder. If you're feeling very under aroused as far as your nervous system goes, waking up or getting out of bed might be harder. So poor sleep patterns might play into that. Maybe if your child or teenager is like pretty restless or moving a lot or spinning or jumping. Okay, I'm going to, sorry, I think I'm supposed to hit admit. Someone's joining in. You know, constant movement, that would be an easy way. Maybe preferring to play on their own. So depending on emotional state or social intelligence, maybe is a good way to say that. Maybe some kids would prefer to stay on their own because conflict always ensues, or that just tends to be kind of a trouble zone. And then the last thing, of course, isn't like a comprehensive list, but the last thing I'll mention for now is a big one that a lot of clients definitely mention, this of having trouble with like a change of plans. If one, you know, if you're going to one restaurant and it was closed or the line was long or whatever, now all of a sudden you have to switch to something else, that can be hard, or just transitioning between one task to the next. So this probably isn't like anything super new, but I just wanted to point out these could be some signs of someone who's feeling a little dysregulated. And just some overall like tips for helping a child or yourself feel a little bit more secure, in control, sticking to a routine. So of course this one feels a little bit like funny at this rate because we're in a pandemic, everything feels different, school kind of feels different, work might look different, like all the things feel different. So any little thing that you can do at home to like have regular meal times, regular bedtime is helpful. And even if it's not a specific time, just having a window of time can make a pretty big difference. We've kind of talked about sleep, but of course, like, you know, for yourself, and I know for myself, if I'm overly tired, then little things are going to bother me more, or it might take me longer to recover from something than it would if I was refreshed and good to go. And then exercise, like regular exercise, even if it's a walk or being outside, obviously is great. And then the last one here is encourage the use of regulation skills, which we're going to get into now. And I would say like relaxation, you know, if you have like relaxation techniques, those are always great. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with the zones of regulation. I know some schools like teach this in class, or they might have a poster in the classroom. But I like to use this with clients, and I would say that it's probably, this would be one of the things that might feel like elementary or simple, but it's actually super helpful, and you could use it as an adult as well. So the blue zone kind of sounds like the color. So it would be like, let's say someone's feeling sad, tired, low, bored, or just lethargic, like moving slow. That would be some things to look for as far as the blue zone goes. The green zone is a great zone. We cannot always live in the green zone. I know that someone mentioned that like their son can't always be happy. But this would be the zone where you're like focused, calm, feeling pretty good, happy, kind of ready for the day. The yellow zone would be, I think of like anxiety, just because that's where I tend to go. If I'm like switching out of the green zone, it's probably most quickly to the yellow zone. But this would be if you're feeling just a little overwhelmed, that like total loss of control, or like total escalating, but getting there, like silly, excited, worried. And then of course the red zone is like you are pretty much a 10 of 10 on escalating, mad, yelling, feeling pretty out of control. And as one of my clients likes to say, she often finds herself in the purple zone, which would be the mix of blue and red. So it's totally normal for us to all be in all the colors at certain points, but my hope in this presentation will be to try to figure out how to navigate these particular zones a little bit more. So, so again, with the nervous system arousal level, so we're either trying to like increase arousal, where someone would feel like a kind of a burst of energy or positivity, or decrease. So of course, if someone's in the blue zone and they're feeling totally tired, sad, low, some things here would be, this says think happy thoughts, but I even think that maybe like listing out loud even just one thing that you're grateful for or thankful for, either in that moment or that day. And it can be as small as like the sun is shining, or I had my favorite breakfast, or whatever. It doesn't have to be like some amazing unicorn situation. But thinking a happy thought, talking about your feelings. So if like a mentor or a parent or a sibling potentially, like talking things out. And then you'll see a couple of like more physical examples. So like rubbing your hands together kind of might sound random at first, but basically if you were feeling like low energy, low mood, maybe distracted by something that happened in the past that you were feeling bad about or sad about, basically rubbing your hands together, one, it would help bring you into the present moment, because then you would feel that your hands are warm. It's kind of giving you something to do and something to focus on in the here and now. Running in place would help like kind of wake up your body. So of course, like getting the blood flowing, asking for a shoulder rub. So I know that not everyone loves touch or hugs, or but some people very much are like a love language of touch. So shoulder rub or asking for a hug, swinging or spinning. So that's depending on where you are, that would be more like appropriate, I guess you could say, or doable. Stretching or jumping jacks would kind of be similar as running in place, and you could kind of do that pretty much anywhere, but that's just getting your brain-body connection going and bringing you into the moment. Strong sense is one that has helped several of my clients. So let's say someone is feeling overwhelmed, or in this, I guess, since we're talking about the blue zone, maybe very down, or they got a bad grade on a test, or they got in trouble for who knows what. This can be something to help bring them back into the present as well. So I know essential oils are around and much more available, seemingly everywhere, but like peppermint would be like an invigorating scent. And also with that, even like a peppermint candy or gum, depending on diet and age and all that stuff. But that would be another thing that could kind of activate. Hydration is always a good idea, drinking water. Eating crunchy foods. So that one might seem silly, but basically, like, if you're eating something crunchy, your, of course, mouth is moving, and then your mind is like hearing the crunch or the food. So that would be like activating your system, bright lights, and listening to loud music. So, or maybe not even, doesn't have to be necessarily loud, but you know, like a fun pop song or a favorite song, upbeat song. And that would be a quick way, depending on where you were, to kind of pull you out of that blue zone. So I feel like these are definitely like kid friendly, but also adult friendly for sure. So I don't know, I'll just ask out loud and know that no one's answering right now, but if you think of yourself or your child, if they tend to go in the blue zone, which like one of these things maybe is new or feels the most helpful in the past, or something that you might try in the future. So the yellow zone is that like anxious, worried, feeling like a little elevated, excited zone. So in this scenario, we would be wanting to decrease the arousal level and calm the body. So talking, of course, to someone else is always a good idea. Take 3 deep breaths. And I, as an adult, use this one. And I feel like, I don't know, you guys can decide for yourself, but I feel like breathing to me always seems like so simple, like, is it really gonna work? But it really does work. And one way I like to describe it, you guys might have like heard of this little trick, but especially for kids, like if you are breathing in through your nose as if you are smelling like fresh baked brownies out of the oven. So you're like really breathing in because it smells so yummy. And then you're breathing out through your mouth like you're trying to blow out a candle on a birthday cake, or birthday brownies in this scenario, I guess. That's a good like visual. And it kind of helps whoever's using it to really get in that like good air and breathe out the air. Because a deep breath is a little different than just like a regular old breath. So of course that would be like a calming motion. Doing a wall push-up, just a push-up on the wall to get some of that, like if you are thinking of like muscle tension and someone feeling like maybe their heart is beating or they're feeling just overwhelmed, any of this, because there's a few on here, like deep pressure, heavy work to muscles, like like a really tight squeeze hug, those types of things are basically releasing some of that tension and overwhelm. A fidget, that's easy enough to like have in your pocket. Go for a walk, take a break. So just step away from whatever it is and take a break. Never mind that. Reading, I feel like depending on how overwhelmed someone was feeling, reading might be a hard transition, but you could try it. We talked about some of the like deep pressure and work to the muscles. Opposite of the last one, you would want like soft lighting or like, you know, with little twinkling lights or whatever you could to create like a calmer space. Listening to soft calming music or like the sound of a stream or the sound of the ocean or something that is regulating more than like a poppy song. And then as opposed to crunchy foods, chewy foods would be good in this scenario. So of course, this depends on like diet and age, but like gummy worms, I feel like that's a terrible idea just because it's sugar, although I'm sure I haven't had a gummy worm in a while. Anyway, side note. But like think of like dried fruit or something that's chewy, that's not just pure like unnatural sugar. Of course, chewing gum would be a good example of that as well. So getting out of the red zone, which is the like total loss of control, totally escalated, yelling and hitting, anger, that zone, it looks a lot like the yellow zone basically, because they're both, you're trying to calm down. So I'll just point out the ones that look a little different than the yellow. Jumping on trampoline, so that would be, but of course, like depends on where you are. Do you have a trampoline? Like you're not gonna have a trampoline at the grocery store. So that's a little bit specific to like your child and where you are. As opposed to just a wall push-up, you could literally push the wall with all your might, and that would get some of that like more tension out than just doing a push-up against the wall. Counting to 20, just stopping, like total freeze your body might help. So of course with each of these zones, you just have to figure out like what works for you, what works for your kid, and how to basically translate those into, you know, if you're not at your house, what does it look like? If you're not with your child, like if their teacher is with your child, what does it look like? Or the grandparent or something like that. Oh yeah, okay, so the green zone, of course, is that like happy, I'm feeling okay, I feel focused and alert. So these are just a couple things for like maintaining in the green. Keep your eyes on what you're doing. Remember your daily goals. So if someone has, you know, a checklist of what they're doing, or maybe one thing that they're responsible for that day, finishing your work, thinking happy thoughts, of course, being a good friend or like sharing with others can promote that like good emotional space, and smiling. So even if I learned this in a hot yoga class a long time ago, but if you smile, no matter what you're doing, your brain is tricked into thinking you're enjoying what you're doing. So just smiling seems like that's not going to do much, but as far as your brain goes, it actually can do a lot. So this is, I just wanted to ask a few questions. So this, of course, is like, you can just kind of think to yourself. But if you're thinking of your child outside of the green zone, like what is the zone that they most frequently find themselves in, or they naturally go to that zone? So I was saying, like, for myself, I know that I'm going to the yellow zone. Like, my anxiety's gotten a lot better, but that's just like my natural slant is I'm gonna end up in the yellow. So when you're thinking about, and you can do it for yourself as well, like what is your most natural other zone? And then can you think of, in that other zone outside of the green, can you think of a place or like state of being that would shift them into that zone? So one example I was thinking of, and now it's a little different with COVID and all that stuff, but I was thinking like going to the grocery store. Depending on the scenario, maybe you're not bringing your kids to the grocery store, or maybe you have to. So maybe that would be a place where kids are feeling overwhelmed, or, you know, most meltdowns happen there. There's a lot of people, it's bright. They might see something they want, but you don't want them to have, all of those things. So of course, it doesn't have to be the grocery store, but I'm just using that as an example here. So my next question is like, how could you change one thing in that scenario to like help set them up, help your child be more successful? So I know that my husband and I do not have kids yet. I know that in the car, a lot of times I'll be like talking to someone on Bluetooth on the speaker. So I was trying to think, let's just say typically, I'll give the example of like, I'm a mom, I'm in my car, I'm bringing my kids to the grocery store. I know that they get overwhelmed. Maybe a smarter thing for me to do would be like, don't make a loud phone call throughout the whole car on the way there. Or maybe I'm not listening to like my favorite loud music. So that would be like, in that scenario, the one thing I would change would be a quiet car ride on the way to the grocery store, to at least give them that, like, my child who might be feeling overwhelmed, that much more help or support on the way there. If that makes sense. I feel like that was like grammatically, I don't know if that flowed, but I think that you can understand where I'm trying to get at. And then the last question was like, how can you apply the same restructuring to any like one particular scenario for yourself? So I know that at least one mom mentioned like she feels like the punching bag, and like her son is improving and staying focused and overall doing better. And then like when he's not, she's the one that he takes it out on. So of course, as parents and caregivers, like you guys need the same like love for yourself and support for yourself. So if you want to just think of what's one scenario, you know, that's pretty common, maybe not every day, but like weekly you're experiencing this thing. What's just one thing you could change either before or after to kind of get like pumped, to like get pumped and more present to be in that scenario, to wind down afterwards, and just see what comes up for you. So I am just now realizing I wanted to, okay, sorry guys. There is one slide that I wanted to share that wasn't popping up. Let's see if it'll pop up. Before we get into the brain, I wanted to go over this. So weird. Okay, so this is a little worksheet that you could, like I could send this particular worksheet, or you could just kind of like DIY it. But this would be something to work through, and you could make it, like this one looks a little childish, so I guess you could make it more appropriate for like a teenager, or, you know, that it doesn't look so little kiddish for those that have teenagers. But the calm down zone is basically, you know, trying to create a space where when someone is feeling angry or frustrated or anxious, they can go to that particular place and try to regulate themselves. So I almost think of this as like a timeout, but like a glad to go to it timeout. So of course this is saying like, where will it be? What would you call it? Because calm down zone might not be like a fun name. And then I like this question a lot. How will I know when it's time to go there? So basically that question is trying to like identify triggers, or like it's creating more self-awareness of, okay, I didn't realize that when I start biting my cheek, that is one clue to tell me that I'm feeling overwhelmed and I need to take a break. So in all of this, the zones and the arousal level, like it's trying to foster and create more self-awareness of, and that's definitely for kids and adults, like becoming more familiar with yourself, and more of those like teeny tiny little, I'm biting my cheek, or I'm shaking my leg while sitting down, like pumping your leg, or however you say that. My thoughts are feeling a little spinny, all those things. So what are the signs that I would need to take a timeout or a calm down timeout? And then what like objects or toys could you put in the area? So again, this is where maybe some like essential oils or a diffuser, or even like one thing that has worked well, you know, those fan, it's like a water bottle, but a fan on top, and you like, I'm just gonna show you, squirt the water bottle like this, and it like spins the fan and it mists you. So a client often feels like hot when she gets overwhelmed, and she just wants to feel like air, and like the water helps kind of bring her back into the moment. So something like that. And that would be something that you could take in the car, and you kind of could have anywhere. And people can mind their own business if they're wondering like why you are spraying yourself off or fanning yourself. So this would be a good thing to think through, as well as like, yes, at your house. But of course, you're not always at your house. So is there anything, any smaller thing that you could do to take something to school, and or like have in the car that feels separate or special, that would help someone calm down or feel more in control? Okay, so I wish I could like take a break and ask if anyone has any questions, but I know we're saving that for the end. So now I want to talk about the brain. So just a quick little like snapshot of the brain. So you see this brain on the screen. The frontal lobe, which also includes the prefrontal cortex, which is like kind of on your forehead, if you want to think about that. Of course, that's the last part of your brain to be fully developed. And that part of your brain has a lot to do with executive functioning. So think of those like higher level skills of like impulse control, decision making, planning, and organization, those types of things. The temporal lobes, which are both on the right and left side, and they're kind of like above your ears. This has a lot to do with emotional regulation. It's not the only spot of your brain that has to do with regulating, for sure, but a lot of emotional regulation comes from there. And also it's a good site to work through trauma and like memories. The parietal lobe is kind of on the top of your brain, a little further back than just the middle, but a lot of like coordination and balance comes in at the parietal lobe, and like physical calming, you would target the parietal lobe for some like mind-body connection and some calming. The occipital lobe is in the back of your brain, and it definitely has to do with visual processing, but it also is a great site for anxiety and calming. And then the motor cortex, which you can't see in this picture because it's kind of right between the frontal lobe and the parietal lobe, has a lot to do with sensory and motor processing. So that is just a quick snapshot of the brain. Of course, there's a lot more to it, but just as a quick introduction. And then neuroplasticity is basically the brain's ability to reorganize itself and create like new neural pathways that are like now a more permanent new pathway. So research on the brain has ramped up over the past probably 15 years. It's been exciting because people want to study it. And this author, Deutsch, wrote a book that is called The Brain That Changes Itself. So I'll just read the quotes in case someone's listening to this and not looking at the PowerPoint. But it says, practicing a new skill under the right conditions can change hundreds of millions and possibly billions of the connections between nerve cells in our brains. So the thing I wanted to point out about that is that we have hundreds and millions and possibly billions of connections in our brain. So our brain works so hard for us. And the amazing thing is that we are not like, I guess in the past, it used to be thought that we're just like stuck with the brain we have, or that's just kind of how it is. And that is not true. So plenty of research shows that brains can change, even in the elderly, brains can change. So there's lots of hope there. And that's basically what we're doing with the neurofeedback side of things, is creating new connections and new neural pathways in the brain. So I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with neurofeedback. It can also be called EEG biofeedback or brainwave biofeedback, but it's all the same thing. And basically on my end of things, I get to see the EEG, which is reflecting different mental states. So let's say someone is very anxious and tense. I could see that in their EEG. Pardon me. Okay, so this will make more sense in a minute when I show you, kind of help you conceptualize it. But brainwave, depending on certain brainwaves and brainwave patterns, you will get certain behaviors. So behaviors are just the expression of how your brainwaves are operating. And neurofeedback is basically helping take your brainwaves from like an unhealthy pattern to a healthy pattern. And that is through training the brain using operant conditioning. So operant conditioning, you can think of, it's as easy to think of because it's the same thing as like if you taught your dog, if you have a dog, to like sit or shake or any other trick, and you probably repeatedly were practicing with the dog and kind of like training, and then eventually, and maybe use like a little treat or praise or something to reward the dog. And eventually over time, your dog doesn't necessarily need a dog treat, although he or she would appreciate it if you gave them one, but they don't necessarily need the like reward to know, yes, I know what you want. When you say sit, I'll sit. And that's an example of a new neural pathway being formed. So our brains are much more sophisticated than a dog's, but the idea of the learning is pretty much the same. So neurofeedback is non-invasive. Nothing's going into the brain, nothing's going into the body. And through sensors that are connected to the head, they're listening to the EEG, and the client is getting feedback from a separate computer that's just playing a movie. So it can be any movie. The movie is not important. It's just the light of the screen gets brighter and darker as the brain is making the healthy changes. And that's the feedback that is helping solidify healthy changes in the brain. And the whole idea behind neurofeedback is that you're kind of like working your way out of sessions. So that it's creating more of a permanent change, like a new default system. Okay, so since it's targeting brain waves, I figured I would just quickly mention the different brain waves. So delta, you might be familiar with because it's mostly associated with sleep. So like newborn babies, puppies, they are making a lot of delta. It's not just for sleep though. Delta has a lot to do with emotional processing and like energy levels. So if you're making too much delta, you might feel tired all the time, even though you just slept, or low in your mood, low motivation. Theta is kind of like a twilight state, or like creativity, intuition. If you have too much theta, you might feel like drowsy, daydreamy, that type of thing. Alpha is your nice, like restful, present-minded, just did a meditation, just took a bubble bath, and I'm feeling very relaxed and present. And then beta is typically broken up into like beta and high beta. But basically beta is your like happy, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed wave. You would like beta if you were going to write a paragraph or do math homework or like do your taxes. You would want your beta engaged. If your beta gets too high, you might find that you have like the hamster wheel thoughts of your brain is working very fast and can't really like shift back down. And then gamma is listed on this slide, and it's a very, very, very focused wave. As far as neurofeedback goes, we don't like do anything with gamma, but it is there. So I'm hoping that this is okay to read, but this is, I think, a sheet that can help conceptualize different brainwave patterns and connect them to different behaviors. So I won't go through every single thing on this sheet, but basically if someone was feeling under-aroused on the left side of the brain, or this would be like the blue zone, they might be feeling like, well, one, ADD, but shy, confused, tired, incredibly sensitive, forgetful, that type of thing. Whereas the middle column is showing kind of basically the yellow or the red zone, where you're over aroused, impulsive, fidgety, impatient, anxious, feeling tense. And then the third column is just basically showing like if you were experiencing the two of them at the same time, which is totally normal. Most people can, if you went down the checklist of things, you would find yourself in each of the columns, especially the first two. And I just checked my phone for the time, so I feel like we are, I'm gonna speed this up because I do wanna have questions. One way of looking at an individual brain for neurofeedback is getting a QEEG or brain map. This is an example of just one piece of a map that basically would show at each site in the brain, is someone experiencing a very high amount of alpha, a very low amount of something else, and basically it would show where the dysregulation lies in the brain. And this is not a complete list of types of things that neurofeedback can be helpful for. So of course, like, I can't promise you it would work. I can't guarantee success, but I can say that, like, I've worked with a lot of clients that have benefited in a variety of different ways. So I'll just leave that there. This is a quote from Daniel Amen, who is a medical doctor that does a ton of neurofeedback and research in the brain, specifically with ADD, ADHD. And basically this quote is just saying that he's seen neurofeedback like increase reading times and decrease need for medication, if that's something that someone would be interested in, decrease in impulsivity and aggressiveness. He has a lot of amazing TED Talks. You might know him even though you don't know him. And then just really quick, my practice, I guess I'll just say this because I want to save time for questions. If you would like to learn more about what I do, what does it look like to do neurofeedback in real life, you can ask me. But I do want to, I guess I can share this slide. This is like some resources if you wanted to learn more, some references, and then questions.
Watched my daughter's anxiety shoot way down with neurofeedback without any medication, and it was really helpful. I learned a lot about that too.
Yeah, it can definitely, I don't even know if I mentioned this, but the neurofeedback basically is targeting the nervous system. So the whole idea of neurofeedback is that it's regulating the nervous system, whether that's like calming you down where you need to feel more calm, or in like activating your nervous system where you need to be motivated, present, critical thinking, all that stuff. Let's see. I have a private message. I'm going to answer it out loud. I think that's okay. So one question was like, what would be helpful of a younger child to calm down from the red zone? So I would start with like trying to get, what am I trying to say here? If I was trying to calm down a 4-year-old, I would try to get in touch with senses, or like physical senses, or their body. So I don't know if you have tried like a mist that's like, lavender or some nice smell, or like pressure, feeling the like physical pressure. I think it helps to like make the brain body connection, is what I'm trying to say. And I don't know, or like quieting, if it feels too loud, like making a quiet space. Anything that, if you think of like, hearing, tasting, smelling, seeing, like if you think of the senses, and then what could you change about any one of those to make it less, not alarming isn't a great word, but like activating, or stimulating. Thank you. Yes, stimulating. Okay, so someone is saying like they, their child tried neurofeedback weekly 1 year and still ended up needing medication. Other strategies also. Is it worth trying again? So I would say that I would say that each clinician is a little bit different. So it could be worth trying again. Like if you were interested in trying it again, I would say definitely yes. Every neurofeedback clinician has like a different modality, or not everyone, but there are a lot of different modalities of neurofeedback that would target different things. And then experience level and training, not to like say anything bad about who you went to, but I would say that's like a good effort. Like I feel like weekly at a year, that's a good like trial run. one question I would have would be, and we could talk more later, did you notice any change from the sessions? Like some people, this is rare, but like, let's say someone comes in for neurofeedback, they just don't notice any change. Like, so a smaller percentage of people aren't receptive to it. Okay, so they're saying it was a UNC study for ADHD. And I know that my quick question would be, in that study, I know that some people receive like the placebo. They have to be in the placebo group where they're doing the sessions, but nothing's really happening. Do you know if they, okay, so they're saying that it did help him. Okay, that's hard to say. I guess if you were interested, I would say it would be worth trying again, even if it was, you know, you tried for a more limited time, like you thought, okay, I'm going to try it for 1 month. And then if it's not making a major change, then just kind of move on. But it might be worth trying for a short period of time to kind of say, to confirm your thoughts on it. And it was not a placebo. I don't know if I said that out loud. I was trying to read it as it came. I would just say thank you, and I will send some of the worksheets that were in this PowerPoint to you.
That's great. Thank you again. Thank you everyone for joining us, and you'll get an email from us with a quick survey. Please fill that out, and then you'll also receive the recording of this as well as the handouts.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Betsy.